What's up, guys? We are back down here at the shop today, and can't tell, we're working on something just a hair different than what we normally work on. And I say that very loosely because I've worked on a lot of these. So this thing came in for a vibration issue. Apparently he's had it at a couple other shops thinking it was drivetrain related, like it had some rear end issues or, you know, drive line, transfer case, whatever. And he called me and asked, you know, what I thought it was. And, you know, I said, hey, you know, leave it in park and rev it up and see if it does it just, you know, basically in neutral, and it did. So we looked at the balancer, and as you can see, it's missing some chunks of rubber, and it was wandering around pretty good. It was shaking back and forth and stuff. So we have this fancy fluid damper that we're going to go ahead and throw on it, give it a little bit of an upgrade. But he wanted to verify that it didn't need anything else while we were in here, so I pulled the balancer off just to verify that the front main seal was leaking, and it was. So and I don't know, I'll try and show you guys. You can see the timing case down there is all covered in oil, so it's leaking. So we're going to go ahead and reseal the front cover, and put a front main seal in it. It's also got a starting issue. Basically, if it sits overnight, it's got a long crank, and usually what it is, which is we're going to go ahead and fix that. Usually what it is it's the fuel tube O-rings or injector tube, whatever you want to call them. The O-ring starts, you know, gets eroded out for one reason or another, and basically causes it to allow air back through the tube, and leak air, you know, basically backfeed the fuel out of the lift or the injection pump back into the system. So when you go to restart it, it has to refill that, you know, and so it causes long crank. So this is an issue he's been having for a few years, and so he's finally deciding to fix it. But yeah, we're gonna put a new belt on it too. The belt's all oil soaked and whatnot, and this thing is nasty. These things are like working on, if not worse than working on 7.3s. 7.3s are oily, greasy pigs. And the Cummins stuff, the older Cummins stuff, tends to be the same way. So they're not the most fun to work on, but yeah, so it's part of the job. But yeah, anyways, so we're gonna get after it here, get the whole and I'll try and, you know, video the process here. But typically how I go about it is I just go straight, rip the radiator out of it. That way it's completely out of the way. It gives you plenty of room around in there. The bad part about these are a lot of times you can't get the clutch fan off because it's too tight or whatever, and the belt realistically doesn't grab it too, you know, as hard as it should, and so you have to get in there. Get my flashlight back out here. You have to get in there, and I mean, you can see that bolt right there behind the pulley. You got to get in there, you know, take the other 3 bolts out, hold the fan up, and run that bolt out with a wrench to get that thing off there. And especially right now, because I already took the balancer off, and so I can't just put the belt on it and you know, give it some extra grab to get that thing off there. So that's always fun, but is what it is. So all right, well, we're gonna get after it here, and I'll get back with you guys here in a bit. I go to tighten up, there's some bolts. There's a bolt right there. There's a couple other bolts behind the timing gear, which that one right there I can physically see is loose. And there's a couple of bolts down. There's one right there, and there's one over there. I think there's a couple more in there. Those are all for the actual timing case itself, and it also has some through bolts from the cover. And most of those were loose, like they weren't even remotely tight. So some of these, for whatever reason, have 10mm headed bolts, and some of them have 11mm. And it doesn't seem like there's any kind of really rhyme or reason, at least not that I've noticed. Maybe there is, and I'm just not paying close enough attention to it. But anyways, so basically what I'm gonna do, it's been a while since I've done this, so I think I lost my special wrench I built, but I'm gonna have to build a wrench, basically bend it up to get to the bolts that are behind the cam gear back in there. They like to leak right in there, right there in that seam, and you can kind of see it, how it's all nice and you can't really. It's hard to show you with the flashlight, but it's all wet right in here, like real wet, and it's pretty obvious that it's been leaking right there. So like I say, we'll basically, and this may not be the way that you guys think that the right way is to do it, but this is the way to do it if you don't, because, so in order to get that case off, if you don't know, in order to get that case off, you basically have to pull, well, no, you do. You gotta pull the cam out, which there are, we've found easier ways, and that's all over, there's videos all over YouTube about how to do that. I think Greg A's done it. Yeah, Greg A's done it a bunch of times, but basically you have to take some dowel, take all the valve train off, take the push rods out, and take some dowel and shave it down, and then tap it into the tappets, and then pull them up and zip tie the dowels together to hold the tappets up. And that's like, and then you basically, so at that point you pull the cam out, and then you'll stuff a half cut piece of pipe or whatever in there, just in case if one of them, loses its grip in the dowel. But that's a big project. I mean, you're talking, you got to tear everything off the front, you got to pull all the valve train off, all of that stuff, in order to do that. And so what I have found works, it's not the right fix, but it's a good enough fix, is basically get this whole area right here cleaned up really, 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 really good. Get it as clean as you possibly can. And then what I use is I use this International, it's Motorcraft, but we call it 7.3 in the dealership. If you walk into the dealership, they call it the same thing, but 7.3 silicone, because that's where it came from. Is International used it to assemble the 7.3s. So what I'll do is I'll take and run a light bead of it along that seam all the way down. And I have yet to have an issue with that, at least doing it all properly. If you don't tighten up these inner bolts in here and you silicone it, it'll leak. 100% it'll leak. But when you tighten those up, it usually seems to give it good enough of a seal that it won't leak if you silicone it. If you don't silicone it, it'll still leak, but not very much. It'll seep. This one really isn't that bad. Like, it's not leaking horrible. So since it's not leaking horrible, I mean, I've literally seen these where they're so loose that while it's running, you can physically see a run of oil running down that crack. And this one wasn't doing that. It's just got oil residue all over everything. So like I say, we're gonna go ahead and do that. We'll get all these parts cleaned up. I gotta go run and pick up the parts for the truck, but we'll get all this stuff cleaned up the best we can. I don't have a parts washer right now. Hopefully I'll have one soon. And it'll make life a lot easier because I can just throw that stuff in the parts washer instead of having to take it out back and scrub it with a scrub brush. So, but anyways, I will, when I get back on this here in a little bit, I'll get back with you guys and show you some more. Alrighty, so here's where we're at. We got front cover on. We got the fluid dampener on. I just cleaned up the crankcase breather there. So he wants me to run. So these hoses, I'll grab the hose. Some of these came with a little catch can on the end of them. Some of them didn't. I think the later ones came with the catch can. But you can see that crankcase vent hose just kind of randomly dumps out right there in the middle of that cover. So, so basically what happens is, any kind of crankcase, venting that happens gets sucked into the fan, and then the fan sits there and twirls it around and sprays it all over everything, all over the front of the engine. And so the higher the miles you get, obviously, the more crankcase, venting it's going to do, so it's going to have more oil, residue and that type of thing. So the higher the miles, the more you're going to have oil just slinging around in here covering everything. And so I usually recommend, especially on higher mileage trucks, to take and route this. This actually looks like it may have had, I don't know, it's got some zip tie marks and stuff on it, so it looks like it may have had a little one of those little factory catch can things on it at some point. But so usually on these higher mileage trucks, what I do is I recommend that that we run the crankcase vent down underneath the truck or to the back of the truck, or at least get it out from in front of the engine, so it doesn't just sit there and puke oil on the all over the front of the engine basically. So but yeah, so that's where we're at. We got that sealed up. If you didn't see that, the best gasket for this front cover is silicone, and this front cover hadn't been taken off before, so it was original equipment here, and they've siliconed it from the factory. So if you're questioning that is the proper way to do it, it is. It's even got little silicone channels right here. You can see these little bumps in the cover there. Those are physically silicone channels, like they're designed to, so basically it creates a lip where the silicone would, is going to sit. So, but yeah, so we got us a nice fancy fluid dampener on it. I got most of everything cleaned up. I got to clean up the fan still. The fan's pretty nasty. The radiator's not as bad as it looks. I mean, there's not even any oil in the fins of the radiator. It just kind of gave it a little bit of an outline there. So I'm not even going to worry about cleaning that up. If it was real bad, I would either clean it up or tell me it needs a new radiator. Everything else in here looks good, even though it's all greasy and nasty. There's not really anything in here that looks like it needs to be replaced. Even the radiator hoses and everything are in good shape. So the only thing that looks like it needs to be replaced is this power steering, or not power steering, AC pump here. It's missing the clutch off of it, but yeah, so we're trying to get this busted out tonight so he can come get it. But I'm gonna get after it here. All right, so we're doing the injector tube, fuel tube, whatever, connector tube, whatever you want to call them. We're doing the O-rings on them. I guess I can show you what they look like when I get this next one pulled out. I'll show you the O-rings. They're small little O-rings. There's these things right here. Place is a disaster right now. This is usually how things happen. I don't know how you guys are, but things become a disaster while you're during a project, so it is what it is. But I was going to continue filming this, but I have the tripod I ordered is not exactly, I don't know, the best. I got to order a new one because I have to have it. You can see it. It's not tall enough. So I have to have it on something in order to see in the engine compartment. So that would require me to move my toolbox around to the other side and stuff, and you're not going to be able to see much anyways. So I will just kind of update you guys when I'm done. I will pull one. I'll pull this fuel tube out here that I'm working on right now, or connector tube, or whatever you want to call it. But I'll pull it out and show you guys what it looks like. There is, let's see. You see the lifting bracket back there. So in order to get access to the back injector line, you can kind of see it, that little line way back in the back there behind the lifting eye. In order to get access to it, to get it loose, you have to pull the lifting eye off. And I believe there's just two, either 15 or 18 millimeter, I can't remember exactly off the top of my head, but just two 15 or 18 millimeter headed bolts that hold that lifting eye onto the head. So I got to pull that off real quick, and then I can loosen up that back line and get that tube out of that side too. It's kind of a pain. I'll be honest with you, it's kind of a pain to get these tubes in and out without pulling the injector lines themselves. But you can do it. It's just a little bit harder. And yes, of course, the right way to do it would be pull the lines off. But again, you can do it without moving the lines. And I'm going to throw a bolt. I don't know if you can see that bolt, that hold down right there was actually missing the bolt out of it. So I'm going to throw a bolt in it when it goes back together. But yeah, anyways, you can do it with the lines in place. It's just kind of a pain in the ass. So anyways, I am going to get back after it here. This thing's got to be done tonight. So kind of working quick here. So I'll touch base with you guys here in a minute. All right. So that's what those things look like. Basically, this tip here goes into the injector body. It physically goes into the side, and then the injector line goes on this end. And basically, the injector line just threads into the head and presses that against it. So the injector line is what physically holds this into the head. Now, the bad thing here is basically this thing was leaking down. So it was bleeding back, and these O-rings are they're all pretty flat, but there's nothing like, jumping out saying, oh, hey, this thing is leaking. So hopefully we put it back together and it's all good to go. The bad side of this is that he's coming to get it tonight, so I won't even get to see it if it'll start good in the morning when it's cold. So we'll see on that one. I can say that it is a possibility that it may have a leak in one of the return lines, like on the back of the head, or something along those lines. So if that's the case, then I guess we'll cross that bridge when we come to it.